What up, everyone? Thanks for checking out another video. Today we're going to take a look at the rise or the birth of political parties in America, the rise of the Federalists and the Democratic-Republicans that occurred from 1789 all the way up until around 1800s. And if you recall American history, when they were writing those words, "we the people," at the Constitutional Convention, they were overturning the old Constitution or the old federal government, the Articles of Confederation, and they were creating a completely new one. And there was a big debate in this country between the Federalists, who wanted a more powerful federal government, who supported ratification of the Constitution, and those people who were opposed to it. And of course, those are the anti-Federalists. And for a year, they were debating whether or not to ratify. The anti-Federalists preferred the Articles of Confederation. They wanted a smaller, a weaker central government. And you have the Federalist Papers, those 85 essays written by Madison, Hamilton, and Jay, defending and describing why the Constitution should be ratified. And eventually the anti-Federalists say, hey, we'll agree to ratify it, but you got to put a Bill of Rights in there. And that's one of the first things that was done in 1789 is the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, drafted largely by James Madison, are adopted. Now everything's going really awesome. Times were great, and George Washington was inaugurated as president in the Capitol at the time in New York City. He's the first, the only one to be elected unanimously by the Electoral College. And things are awesome because you got checks and balances. You got three branches: legislative, executive, judicial. He's setting up all sorts of precedents. He's setting up the government. And things are going well because he's got an all-star squad. You got the Secretary of War, Henry Knox. You have the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. And you have the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, some of the key figures in Washington's cabinet. And here's what happens. People like Hamilton want to get things going in terms of the manufacturing aspect of the economy. Remember, the economy had struggled under the Articles of Confederation, and people who identified themselves as Federalists, the people who advocate for a strong central federal government, they kind of start, advocating for policies that Hamilton is going to pursue. Now, on the flip side are the people who side with Jefferson, and those people are going to become known as the Democratic Republicans. So how does this take place? Well, really quick thing to keep in mind is the Constitution says nothing about political parties. In fact, no one thought that political parties were needed in this new republic. The framers didn't think they were going to be needed. And the debates between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists kind of fade away once the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are adopted. So how do we get these political parties? And the causes of political parties in the 1790s can be broken up into two reasons: domestic and foreign policy. One, the domestic, Alexander Hamilton's financial program. Hamilton wants the economy to stabilize. He wants to deal with the financial difficulties of the young nation, and he does this by a couple of things that cause division. One is the assumption plan. He wants to pay off the national debt. He wants the federal government to take over the state debt, and that causes division between Hamilton's people and people who more closely ally themselves with Jefferson. And eventually they sort that out by moving the capital by the Potomac River in what is today Washington, D.C. Another thing that causes tension is the excise taxes that Hamilton wants to put in place. He wants to pay down the debt. He wants high tariffs to protect the young nation's infant industries against British competition. He wants to foster American manufacturing, and he wants to raise revenue by these taxes and these tariffs to pay down this debt. And, of course, the big one is going to be the national bank, where you could deposit government funds and you can have a stable currency, which was a big problem under the Articles of Confederation. Now, the thing that happens is all of these goals is Hamilton trying to kind of develop the nation's economy, particularly the manufacturing sector, but it brings up debates over the power of the federal government. And in particular, the issue of interpreting the Constitution. You have the Federalists who are going to believe in a loose interpretation or a broad interpretation of the Constitution, and Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans are going to be strict interpreters of the Constitution. And the bank issue shows that. The other aspect that causes division in the 1790s is foreign policy issues. You know, in 1789, France has the start of the French Revolution. And at first, a lot of Americans were supportive of this revolution. France is becoming a republic. They had helped us during the American Revolution with the Battle of Saratoga. But then it becomes radical, and people's heads are getting cut off at the guillotine. The king and the queen's heads are chopped off, and then France goes to war with the rest of Europe's monarchs. And there's a division over whether or not we should get involved. And the Federalists, under George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, say no thank you. In fact, Washington issues a proclamation of neutrality, where we say we're going to stay out of this. We're not down with this war. And of course, you have people like Citizen Genet coming over and trying to get Americans to support, and that causes problems. And then there's the problem with the British. You know, the Treaty of Paris of 1783 did not solve everything, and the British had forts on American soil. They were trading guns to the Native Americans, and they were impressing American sailors out in the ocean. And when Jay's Treaty is negotiated in 1794, the Jeffersonians are outraged that it really doesn't address all the problems that England was causing us. And so the two political parties are debating the role of the U.S. in international affairs. And ultimately, these debates and these divisions over these issues are going to lead to the growth of these two political parties. The Federalist, on one hand, kind of symbolized by the leadership of Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, and on the flip side, Thomas Jefferson with the Democratic-Republicans. And key point, the Federalists are going to believe in a very large, powerful central government, whereas the Jeffersonians are going to believe in a small central government. And of course, the rise of the two-party system is going to go through many changes. And you could see that on this, of course, in the election of 1800. It's going to be called the Revolution because the Jeffersonians are going to take power, the first peaceful transition of power in this young nation's history. Then you're going to have the Hartford Convention. The Federalists were already on the decline, but their involvement in the Hartford Convention during the War of 1812 causes them to further lose support. And then you have this so-called era of good feelings where there is only one political party, but eventually that all ends with the election of 1824, which we'll cover another day, another time. But hopefully you know that's the rise of political parties. Thanks for checking out the video. Subscribe to Jocz Production. We got two political parties. They don't do much. They don't get along much. But now you know where they came from. Peace.